Commissioner cell phones, thank you. We're ready now, Chairman Silva.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Morning.
I would like to call to order the March 14, 2018 meeting of the Committee on Finance, Audit, and Budget. Will the Secretary call the roll,
Yes,
please?
the Reverend Miller is running a little bit late. Mr. Irvine.
Here.
Ms. Alvarez-Alias.
Here.
Mr. Peterson.
Here.
Mr. Youngblood.
Here.
Chairman Silva.
Here.
We have a quorum of the committee with 5 members present.
Our first order of business is the approval of the committee minutes of February 14, 2018. May I have a motion?
So moved. Second.
Will the Secretary call the roll, please?
Yes, Mr. Irvine.
Yes.
Ms. Alvarez-Alias.
Yes.
Mr. Peterson.
Yes.
Mr. Youngblood.
Yes.
Chairman Silva.
Abstain.
Abstain. The motion passes with 4 yes votes.
Our next order of business is the review of the finance report. Jeremy?
Good morning. I'm Jeremy Fine, your Chief Financial Officer. And I'm here to walk through the report for the month of January. I'll start off with the revenues, and as you see here with regard to fare box and passes, we have green for the first time in quite a while. So we're very excited to see some positive momentum with regard to variance to budget for fare box and pass totals for the month of January. We're up about 200,000 for the month. So again, it's a great shift in trajectory for our revenues on fare and passes for the month of January. Reduced fare subsidy, we continue to suffer from the fact that the state is only remitting half of the expected amount for reduced and free rides, as we've seen over the past several years. With regard to non-fare box revenues, we see a slight decline here, and that's primarily due to timing with regard to some of our non-capital grant revenues. So overall, for the month of January, our total revenues on a variance to budget are down 1.2 million, which also coincides directly with that reduction in the reduced fare subsidy of 1.2. Average fare is up a couple of pennies, as expected due to the increase in the fare and pass totals. So we have an average fare of about $1.24. And free rides, we continue our enforcement efforts on that front as well. With regard to our expenses for the month of January, we continue to try to continue to control our expenses. On labor, we see positive variability to budget by a little less than $500,000. With regard to material, we see an unfavorability of a little over $500,000, which is due to the timing of some of the purchases that we made in the month of January. So again, we'll continue to watch that as we move forward throughout the months. Also, material was negatively impacted slightly by some of the winter weather that we saw in the month of January. While we didn't have big events like we saw in February, there were a number of smaller events throughout the month. For fuel, we see a slight negative unfavorability here for fuel. This is really just due to the timing of the purchases that we made in November, December, and January. We saw some positive favorability in prior months, partly due to the timing of actual receipt of some of the fuel purchases in January. So again, a timing issue with regard to the fuel purchases in January. Power was slightly favorable. As we've seen in prior years, we saw more outsized favorability for fuel and power because of the fact that we were able to lock in at historically low rates earlier in the past year or two. We knew what our cost structure was going to be for fuel and power for 2018. So we won't see some of the outsized favorability numbers that we've seen in the past because we knew, which we've been able to benefit from, we knew what our cost structure was going to be for 2018. Provisions for injuries and damages is coming in as expected, and then security services is slightly favorable, as is other expenses. So overall, total operating expenses are about $500,000 off of where we expected for the budget, which again is primarily due to the timing of some of the purchases that we made in the material and fuel lines.
Chairman, before you move away from this page, again, I'm just reading the explanation on page 4 when it talks about the fuel, and you've got here the fuel revenue equipment expense was about $600,000 unfavorable to budget due to the supplier fully replenishing the tank in January. So is this a supplier issue? Because most of our fuel is hedged. So is this a supplier?
This is the timing of the receipt of the fuel supply.
Okay, so does the supplier help offset some of this cost in the future? I mean, as I read it, it is though we had purchased it, but the supplier didn't get it to us in time.
So there were two things going on. One is with regard to the actual receipt of the fuel. That again was primarily just a delay in, just the receipt of the fuel from November and December. So we had slightly higher favorability in those months and slightly lower in the month of January. There was a supplier issue with regard to Mansfield and its supplier. There was a change. There was a slight difference in price with regard to the new supplier. We continue to have conversations with Mansfield to offset that cost associated with the change in supplier. That should be a 1-month issue. We will not see that in the future. And that was a relatively nominal differential, not anywhere near the order of magnitude that we're talking here. But again, that's something that, Mansfield will be picking up.
Okay.
But you were hedged, you wouldn't have to fall into this.
So we are hedged. We do know what our cost structure is. Again, the primary reason why there was a differential in the favorability here was just because we took receipt of the fuel in the month of January, and as such, we pay in the month of January. So if we would have taken, receipt of the fuel in November and December, we would have paid in those months. So again, some of this is just a timing issue with regard to the receipt and the payment for the fuel in the month of January that would have otherwise been spread over, in other times potentially spread over a longer period of time.
But who determines the reception then?
So the reception of the fuel is handled by the operations folks that again take receipt of the fuel and use that fuel obviously to fuel up the buses and other vehicles for the system.
Thank you. Any other questions?
So as far as the revenue, do you attribute that mainly to the increase in our fares? Because I haven't seen this green since I've been here, so.
So the increase in the fares has an effect on, obviously has a very direct effect on the revenues that are generated for fare totals. With regard to pass totals, we're also optimistic about what we're seeing on that front. We have seen an increase for the month of January with regard to 7-day passes in particular. So again, folks are seeing the benefit of our pass products. As the base fare increased, we talked about that as part of the budget process. As the base fare increased a quarter, and we kept the passes flat for 7 days and up for only $5 for the 30-day. We have seen some people shifting from pay-per-use over to the passes, which again provides them a value and us, again, some additional benefit on our pass totals for the month of January.
So with regards to that, with, for example, the 7-day people paying more attention to that. Are there some where we might see an increase in, where we've stayed the same, that we might promote maybe a little bit more or let people know a little bit more about?
So again, we'll be watching that as we move forward, but absolutely, we'll be looking at ways to continue to promote our past products, as we move forward throughout the year. I want to be a little cautious just by my, general disposition, but, 1 month isn't necessarily a trend here, but we are optimistic on what we've seen, at least for the month of January. And to your point, Director, we will be continuing to make efforts to promote the benefits to folks out there, our core customers, with some of the benefits of these other past products.
So Jeremy, this is January, we're at March 14th, what is February?
So we're closing the books right now with regard to February. So we're still maybe a couple of days off of being able to give a full indication. But, again, we remain cautiously optimistic with regard to some of the revenues. We'll continue to watch the expenses, particularly due to the larger snow event in February. So again, I don't have a lot of detail right now, but we'll be presenting that, in next month.
Any other questions?
Sure. Jeremy, on the issue of the passes and how it's breaking down this year versus last year, could we maybe look at after you've got about 3 months of data, reporting back to the board on analyzing any trends that you see based on this first few months compared to the last year, and factoring in weather and all the other very variable factors?
Absolutely.
And then the second question is, I was happy to see that the Ashland Express, the X9 and the X49 Western Express have increased versus last year, unlike the decrease in other systems. Has there been any discussion about other routes that might be good candidates for express service?
I'll defer to Carol Morey to handle the question with regard to express routes. But again, we're glad to see positive directions here.
Yeah, we're definitely glad to see that those routes continue to grow. We always continue to look at ways to improve our service, keeping in mind our budget constraints.
Thank you.
I think as a general matter, what the express bus ridership numbers are showing us is that if we can find ways to speed up our bus service, our customers respond to that. And so whether we're talking about express bus service, we're talking about signal prioritization efforts, we're talking about dedicated bus lanes, I think all of those feed into that conversation. And Carol and I have been having a larger, better bus conversation about what do we do to speed up our bus service in general and make it, give us some sort of competitive advantage over the single occupancy vehicle, given the congestion that we see in a lot of our corridors right now. It's a big conversation, the conversation we're having with the city and with CDOT, who have to really be partners with us in that. But Carol and her team have done some analysis around those issues, and we certainly have put together some thoughts on how we do that and ultimately hope to get support from the city and, with them facing their budget challenges, to find ways to actually improve the speed of bus service throughout the entire system.
Any other questions? If there are no further questions, thank you, Jeremy.
Thank you.
Our next order of business is the review of an ordinance authorizing amendment to a parking management agreement with CPS Chicago Parking LLC. Jeremy and Mike.
Good morning, directors. Michael Gwynn, Director of Revenue and Fare Systems. Presented for your consideration is an amendment to our contract with CPS Parking to grant CTA additional flexibility in how we make capital improvements to our park and ride lots in order to provide a better customer experience and ultimately increase revenue. In 2014, CTA approved a 10-year contract with CPS to operate and maintain 14 of CTA's park and ride lots. CTA's park and ride lots have suffered from deferred maintenance, and many are now in need of repaving. While CPS is responsible for minor maintenance, such as pothole repair and painting, CTA is responsible for any major capital improvements. Under the proposed amendment, CTA could authorize CPS to undertake capital improvements identified by CTA and reimburse CPS directly through a broader array of funding streams. This will not only allow CTA to make overdue capital improvements, but in addition, 100% of all work authorized under the amendment will be performed under CTA's Small Business Enterprise, or SBE, program. The nature of this work is ideally suited to SBEs, and staff is excited to launch this initiative. All capital work at the park and rides under the contract must conform with CTA's policies and procedures, and CTA retains final authority to authorize work to begin and approve it upon completion. We will make these improvements with specific eyes, and a specific eye towards incorporating accessibility considerations. This amendment will allow CTA to improve our users' experience and to maximize revenue from these valuable resources. Anyone who's driven by 47th and Kedzie or Rosemont can clearly see how much more welcoming and pleasant those repaved parking lots are and how they make a good first impression of the CTA. Indeed, customers are demonstrating the value of these projects as a significant increase in utilization at 47th and Kedzie corresponded with the improvements, and Rosemont continues to be one of our best performing lots. We look forward to bringing these improvements to customers throughout the rest of the system. Thank you, and I'll happy to answer any questions that you have.
Any questions?
So Mike, this is really CPS just front funding
Well,
the
it's
capital projects, and then
it's a way for us to use other revenue streams for CPS to go ahead and do the work.
yeah, I know in the write-up, you said you've got about 3.8 million worth of projects identified for FY18, so they would just front fund it, and then Jeremy, you would come back and pay them at a later date.
That's correct.
Okay.
That's correct. This just provides a new kind of funding strategy around it, which again allows us to get to some of these projects in a quicker way, which again is just reinvesting in assets that are revenue producing for us. As Mike indicated, at the 47th and Kedzie project, as well as Rosemont, but 47th and Kedzie in particular, we saw a big increase in the utilization rates. Rosemont already was highly utilized, so we continue to see some improvements there, but kind of the continued utilization at that facility. So again, this is exciting new innovation, so to speak, in the way that we're funding, and again, getting reinvesting in the assets that are out there producing not only direct revenues through parking, but also allowing people better access to the system so that we not only pick up parking revenue, but riding revenue as well.
On the SBE portion of it, do we keep track of that, or do we get reports from them, or how is that going to be?
I will ask Juan Pablo to come on up and describe exactly what we do.
Yes, we'll be monitoring the SBE participation like we do for any other contract. We're conducting site visits and verifying payments to the SBEs.
Do me a favor, since this is something new,
Can I also add one other thing, that as part of this process, we'll also be providing periodic reports to the board on this SBE participation and the work that's being done under this program. So you will be informed as to what's happening and when it's happening and who's doing that work.
and that's what I was going to ask, but you just quarterly reports, or however often?
Yes, we'll be providing those reports.
So will that go into the construction reports, or what? Or is
No,
that going to be just
that'll be a separate report that'll be
separate
given to you
report?
just for that. I think one of the things that I want to point out about the SBE program is that, we've been doing a lot of work with small and minority-owned businesses to find ways for them to get entree into CTA to do work. The nice and unique thing about this type of work is that it is more just pure construction type work. It doesn't have the challenges of working on our right-of-way or dealing, being around an operating environment in the traditional sense that we have to deal with, which I think will actually open up these opportunities to a much broader array of minority-owned companies than we normally would see for the type of work that we typically do. So I think it's going to be a great gateway opportunity to leverage this work in a way that supports that diversity goal.
So do we share our lists with CPS, or they have their own list? How does that work?
We provided a list of certified small businesses to CPS, and we'll be conducting an outreach event to network the CPS with the small businesses.
Do we also approve the SPEs?
Yes, we certify small businesses here at CTA through the DBE program.
That's correct. Is ABLE still a standalone organization?
Able? No, it's
I
not.
thought they merged. No, I'm just looking, you've got assistant agencies.
Yes.
Here in the back, and I thought they merged at one point with the Business Leadership Council.
I could look into that and see if they did.
Okay.
Any other questions? If there are no further questions, may I have leave to place this item on the omnibus for approval?
So moved.
Second?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Our next order of business is an ordinance authorizing a co-promotional trade agreement with the City of Chicago through its Department of Cultural Affairs and Special Events. Jeremy?
This is our annual co-promotion with DCASE, which is the Chicago Department of Cultural and Special Events. This is the 26th year that we have partnered with DCASE, and DCASE organizes the large events such as Taste of Chicago, the Blues Fest, Jazz Fest, Gospel Fest, Chicago's Farmers Markets, and the Air and Water Show. There are 16 festivals and special events that are included in the co-promotion. CTA is providing $897,700 in unsold advertising on buses and trains in exchange for sponsorship recognition at the various DCASE events. Once again, this year we're going to be offering larger format car cards for the Taste, the Lake FX Summit, and Fistar Awards, as well as the Millennium Park Concert Series. And then in exchange for this consideration, we'll receive dedicated space on the event's websites to allow us to elevate CTA's profile for people learning more information about the events. The promotion will allow CTA to reach out to a larger audience, including visitors and residents who might not currently use the system, and encourage use of CTA to access these wonderful events. Thank you.
Which ones are the largest events?
So Taste of Chicago is the largest, it's the longest, and then Blues and Jazz Fest are the next biggest ones.
Lollapalooza and Marathon?
Lollapalooza is a separate entity, not managed by DCASE, and then the Marathon is Bank of America, so we'll have another co-promotion later on for that. But those are both clearly large events, but just not under DCASE.
Okay. Any other questions? If there are no further questions, may I have leave to place this item on the omnibus for approval?
So moved.
Second.
Our next order of business is an ordinance authorizing a University Pass, UPass, program agreement for 2018-2023 with participating colleges and universities. Jeremy and Mike.
Thank you again. So our current UPass contract expires this fall. And in front of you for consideration is a new UPass contract to carry us through 2023. The UPass program was established in 2000 and provides full-time students at degree or certificate granting schools unlimited rides on all CTA trains and buses during the school term. We have 62 schools participating in the UPass program, representing over 130,000 students. The new contract includes several enhancements designed to reduce the burden on the participating schools of administering the program. The biggest is that we've launched a new online management portal to automate many of the processes that were previously manual. The portal will also collect additional student information such as email address and year in school so that CTA can better communicate directly with students about the program, about key deadlines and parameters, as well as transition points. In conformance with the 2018 budget, the UPass rate increases 18 cents in this contract from $1.07 per day to $1.25 per day, which is still lower than the 25-cent change in the base fare. One other addition is building on President Carter's charge to seek innovations and enhancements to service. The contract also grants staff the ability to enter into short-term experimental programs with subsets of schools with the goal of increasing ridership and enhancing the program, provided that these experimental programs make no change or don't reduce the UPass rate. Insights gained from these experimental programs could translate into broader new ridership initiatives for the general riding populace. Thank you, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you have.
How do we define full-time student?
It's per the contract, it's 12 credit hours.
12 credit
Yeah.
hours. Any questions?
In all of the schools, how many schools do we have in, Mike?
62,
And all 62 are renewing?
yes. We haven't seen too many people drop out generally. Typically, when they drop out, they are either closing up shop or have other significant problems not UPass related.
Any other questions? If there are no further questions, may I have leave to place this item on the omnibus for approval?
So moved.
Second.
Our next order of business is a review of an ordinance authorizing an intergovernmental license agreement with the City of Chicago for a freestanding advertising billboard at 4114 West Irving Park Road, Chicago. Jeremy?
Thank you. Jeremy Fine, your Chief Financial Officer. The CTA and the City of Chicago have a long history of entering into multi-year license agreements for the CTA's use of city property and the city's use of CTA property. We're asking for this authorization to enter into an intergovernmental license agreement with the City of Chicago for the use of CTA property at 4114 West Irving Park. That's Irving Park in Kedvale, which is along the Kennedy Expressway. The authorization would allow the city and its billboard sign contractor, J.C. Co., to install a digital billboard sign. This property currently contains a substation that is used as a bus turnaround, and the CTA operations will not be impaired by the installation and operation of the sign. Pursuant to city ordinance, the city and J.C. Co. have the exclusive right to install billboards within the city, and the CTA has no legal right to do so. The CTA would not incur any costs. In addition, J.C. Co. would be providing all required insurance and indemnification. The term of the IGA will be similar to other long-term license agreements for the property that the CTA and the city have. This agreement expires at the end of 2037 unless extended or terminated earlier. The CTA will also have access to the Kedville digital billboard and all other digital billboards within the network. Be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions?
Do you know how many, Jeremy, how many other locations we have billboards up?
On CTA property, this is the only location that the city was looking at. The city has to install 60 billboards citywide.
Any other questions?
But they're not currently using all of those, right?
They've only installed approximately 48 of the 60 faces that are, part of the contract.
Any questions? If there are no further questions, may I have leave to place this item on the omnibus for approval?
So moved.
Second?
Thank you, Jeremy. Our final order of business today is the review of 10 purchases and sales award recommendations. Presenter Ellen McCormick. Good morning.
Good morning.
We will start with contract numbers A1 through A3. Any questions?
So for A2, you didn't get any responses from a DBE? I see you sent out 10.
No, we did not.
Any other questions for A1 and A3? We're gonna move to contract number B1. Any questions? Let's move to contract number C1. Any questions?
Yeah, could you just talk a little bit about the rear door mobile validators?
Thank you. The proposal is to pilot, do design work and pilot and do a test install of the rear door boarding. It's, again, building on the concept of trying to innovate new products and enhancements to the customers. Rear door boarding is something a lot of other properties do. So we are investigating how to integrate it with Ventra. So if you think about what you need to do, it's not just putting a fare box on the back, but it's adding a whole new secondary system to that back door and giving the driver the ability to control it. So this is just funding to go in there, design it, confirm that it works, and then we'll be able to figure out what that next step is about possible deployment.
And would this just be on the articulated buses for now?
That is what we are looking at right now, but if we get it to work on the Arctics, we could roll it out anywhere else.
Okay, and the bus operator has the ability to independently open those rear doors?
Yes, that's one of the prerequisites that we would have to have.
Great,
And he'll also have the ability to turn that, the back device on and off.
great.
And there are other systems that are currently using this successfully.
It's very typical overseas, definitely, and other properties here do it typically as part of a effort to speed up boarding and just drive customer benefit.
I'm happy to see us taking a step towards all-door boarding. Has there been any consideration about the bus stop configurations, making sure that there's clear space, where this would be occurring?
I would defer probably to Carol about placement and how we would deploy it in the bus.
I know it's a little bit down the road. I'm
Yeah,
just
I would-
thinking ahead, I guess.
So our bus stops are typically configured so that there's access to the rear door for alighting, so that would allow for the boarding as well. And as Mike indicated, this is really about speeding up boarding and speeding up buses, making them more attractive to our customers.
Great. Thank you.
Can you give us a little bit more light, okay, in the C1 contract, Ellen? C1 contract,
The change order?
the change order, yeah.
So this is, the change order will allow for the upgrade, installation, and maintenance of the software and hardware for CTA's open standard fare system, and also for the purchase of new revenue equipment at 14 rail stations.
And that is for 12 years. So for the next 12 years, okay, we are committed to cubic.
Right, it's till 2024.
Thank you. Any other questions? Let's move to contract number F1 to F3. Any questions? Finally, will be contract number G1 and G2.
So G1, I've got a question, just in terms of kind of going forward, just because, this is LED lighting. So just because, technology is constantly changing and getting better, and I know this is a sole source, and I've had this conversation before about sole sources for me are like annuities. But at what point do you kind of look back and determine, let's see what else is out there that's better, new LED lighting, new company that we can bring in so that we're not just stuck constantly with one firm that develops it, they're the only one that can maintain it.
So,
We got 3 years here, but I'm just looking at the additional, 1-year contracts. I'm like, look, technology's changing, a lot of folks are bringing things to the market, so, what are we thinking about in terms of
yes,
looking down
just
the road with this?
for the record, Veronica Alanis, Chief of Strategy, Data and Technology. So this is the LED signs that go over the bus shelters. As you may recall, a couple of months ago, we came with an extension just to give us a bridge to complete this process. Luminator is the company that designed these signs, And they're the only ones that J.C. Deco allows to put signs into their bus shelters currently. I think what we could do in the future is just ask J.C. Deco if they're open to working with other companies. But that's a big part of why we have to go with Luminator.
Yeah, I would ask them, would they be willing to work with us? I gotta believe someone else could put lighting in down the road that would be comparable or compatible.
Right. And these are the bus tracker signs, just so
Yeah, the bus
everybody's clear.
tracker.
Mhm.
Ellen, can you talk about G2, okay, that's the licensing, okay, of the Microsoft software?
I can talk about
Okay,
that.
please.
So this is a piggyback to the State of Illinois contract with CDW to purchase our Microsoft licenses. It's up to 2,600 licenses that we could purchase through this contract. It's for 36 months. One of the benefits of piggybacking off the State of Illinois' procurement efforts is not only the fact that, you know, they go through the procurement and we get the opportunity to piggyback off that contract, but a lot of times because of their how big they are, we are able to take advantage of better rates. So in this case, we get better rates as a result of piggybacking.
So do we get certain number of licenses? Is that the way it
Yes,
works?
it's up to 2,600 licenses, Microsoft licenses.
And we do get a better price, right?
We do get a better price. So on average, you know, over the course of the, I think this is a 3-year contract, you know, it could be as much as 300 to 500,000, depending, you know, there's individual rates for individual types of licenses. So the rates, once you start looking at them license by license, they are cheaper when you go with a piggyback like this. They have more buying power.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Just curious, not just with this, but with regards to other contracts, do we often look, especially in the area of technology, at other city, county, you know, contracts that we can piggyback off of?
We typically have piggybacked off either city or state contracts. I'm not aware, at least since I've been in technology, of any county contracts. I don't know if you can speak to it.
I guess my bigger question is if we're looking often, you know, to see if there's other places so that we can get savings and.
We do that as a matter of course.
Uh-huh.
One of the things is the original contract that we piggyback off of has to have language allowing us to piggyback off of it.
Okay.
So that's part of it too. But with the initiative that the mayor had where the transit, or the procurement departments are working together, we're trying to make sure that's in all our contracts. So yes, it's definitely something we look at on a regular basis throughout for all of our contracts.
Is that language becoming more boilerplate now?
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Okay. Thank you.
We definitely have it in all of our contracts.
Right.
Any other questions? If there are no further questions, may I have leave to place these 7 contracts on the omnibus for approval?
So moved.
Second.
Since there is no further business to come before this committee, may I have a motion to recommend board approval of the omnibus?
So moved.
May I
Second.
have a second? Will the secretary call the roll,
Yes,
please?
Mr. Irvine?
Yes.
Ms. Alva Rosales?
Yes.
Mr. Peterson?
Yes.
Mr. Youngblood?
Yes.
Chairman Silva?
Yes.
That motion is approved with 5 yes votes.
And finally, may I have a motion to adjourn?
So move.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned.
Just give me a few minutes, Terry, please. Terry. Good afternoon.
I'd like to call to order the regular scheduled meeting of Chicago Transit Board for March 14, 2018. Would the secretary call the roll?
Yes, Mr. Miller is absent. Ms. Irvine?
Here.
Ms. Alvarez?
Here.
Mr. Silva?
Here.
Mr. Youngblood?
Here.
Chairman Peterson?
Here.
We have a quorum with 5 members of the board present.
Thanks, Greg. The first order of business today is public comment.
Yes, sir, we have 2 public comment speakers today. I would ask them to come up. Ms. Leslie Cosby. If you would please step right up, Ms. Cosby. And also Mr. David Dalka. Excuse me. Just to remind the speakers that we limit our comments to 3 minutes or less. If there's other issues that you wish to speak about, we can always meet afterwards with other people who are here. And I would like to start with you, Ms. Cosby, since you had contacted us first. If you'd like to address the board, either be seated or standing, whichever one you would wish to do. Thank you.
Hi. Leslie Cosby, longtime CTA and PACE customer.
Okay. You can have a seat.
Okay, thank you. Oh, okay. Okay. What I've been wanting to address for a while is I was at the Jefferson Park Station, and I was trying to go to Devon and Milwaukee. And, I found out that there is no bus now, CTA bus going from Jefferson Park to Devon. So I was told I could take the 270. But I had, it was either a one-day pass or a weekly pass. I can't remember. It was not a 30-day. I know that for sure. I had to pay to get to Devon, which is, as far as I know, on the south side, still in Chicago. And from Jefferson Park to Devon is about approximately 2 miles. So I was just wondering what can be done about that.
Okay. So you were at the Jefferson Park Station and you were trying to get to Devon. You said
In
you
Milwaukee.
had
Devon and Milwaukee,
a,
yes.
Devon and Milwaukee, and you said you had either a 2 or 7-day pass.
One or, I mean, I
One or
said,
the other.
Yeah, one or a weekly or one day.
Dover, who on your staff can speak with Ms. Cosby? Yeah.
Mike
You see
Gwynn, who
Mike,
handles our
Mike
fair
in the
media.
back.
He's
So,
right in
so
the
Mike
back,
will help you
and
with
he
that
can help
issue.
you out with
He
that
should
issue.
be able to resolve that and give you some answers. Because you had to pay another fare. Is that what you're saying? You had to pay an additional fare
Yeah, on the
To-
PACE bus, because
Yeah.
there is no CTA bus.
on a PACE bus
Right,
because there's no CTA bus.
right, and they cut that out, and they cut out the Harlem bus also going north.
Okay.
And I was just wondering why they didn't, I don't know, make some kind of provision for that.
Why CTA didn't make a provision for it?
Yeah, or yeah, whoever, they cut it out,
Yeah.
and now there's nothing unless you pay more money, even if you have a pass. So yeah.
So
well,
Carol, this might be an issue for you.
Right.
So as opposed to Mike, this sounds like a Carol issue
Oh,
for
okay.
you. So Carol will
Carol, okay,
provide-
I'm going to
Yep.
speak with her. Okay.
Yes.
Also,
Okay.
the office here.
Yes.
Now, are you aware? I mean, I know you should be aware, but just to bring it to your attention, this is the only office out here where you can replace a lost bus pass.
Okay.
So this happened to me for real. I lost my pass on a Friday evening. I was stranded in the house until Monday. Because, first of all, there's only one location, period. But then it closes at 4:30.
Okay.
So from 4:30 Friday to Monday morning, you have no option. You can't even go on the internet, nothing.
Okay.
So I was wondering if something can be done about that.
Yeah, that's a good issue, durable customer service issue.
Yeah, we can follow up with you. That is a Mike Gwynn, Mike Gwynn that you oversees our fair media, and he can talk to you about what the options are, how we address that issue.
Okay, one more thing. I have more, but I'm just going to stop after this one more
No,
issue.
that's fine. No,
Okay.
that's-
You, wait a minute. I have it right here. Okay, did you know that you can only buy a pass to be loaded at this office If you buy a brand-new pass from Currency Exchange or Walgreens or whatever, it cannot be used. And they're like, well, you can use that for backup. I don't understand this.
You can only load it at this location?
Yes, and you have to buy it. You can walk in with a brand-new pass with receipts and everything, and they're like, you have to buy it there. Mandatory. Yes?
Is that another Mike Gwynn? That doesn't sound.
That's another Mike Gwynn issue.
No, but it's happened before. It wasn't
It's
just me.
happened?
Oh, it's happened to me, and I saw the people online were saying that. The lady was saying, I just bought this. She said, well, I'm sorry. And then they go back and get theirs. They send the package and open it, whatever. And these are like unused passes. So, yes,
Okay.
more revenue for the CTA. I know you all need it. More
Yes,
than
we
us.
do. And I know that we do have options online that can deal with certain issues with your passes, but I would like for you to talk to Mike Gwynn, who can basically follow up directly on your situation and figure out what we need to do.
Okay, one last thing. You should maybe consider, hopefully, having tickets, numbered tickets for the office, because sometimes that line is out the door. I've stood in line up to 45 minutes, but I saw a couple people who had canes, and they were in the line, but there was no way to get out of line without losing your place. So maybe if they have tickets, that might help.
I think that's a good suggestion.
I like all
Follow
your
up on that.
suggestions.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr.
Thank you, Ms.
President.
Cosby.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Our final speaker will be Mr. David Dawkerson.
Hello, my name is David Dalk. I live at 1006 West Roscoe Street, right at Roscoe and Sheffield, 2 blocks south of Wrigley Field, 2 blocks north of Belmont. I come today in friendship and in the name of budget reduction and improvement of service. I was last before this body in April of 2015, which was the day that the previous president left, and this gentleman was installed a few months later. So I think some of my concerns got lost, even though Mr. Irvine came and visited the site and had very productive conversation with me. So I seek to resume that and just bring some new issues that are there. So one of the issues I discussed with Mr. Irvine in 2015 is that we spent $500 million to improve all the Brown Line stations and have 8-car Brown Line trains. Currently, the CTA during midday hours, about 10 to 2 p.m., is only running 4-car trains, which is a reduction from the 6-car trains we used to have. I seek what we paid for. We paid to have 8-car trains all day long. Why am I standing in a 4-car train like this in the middle of the day when we paid to expand them to 8 cars? That's my first question.
Okay. You said 8-car trains, and then you mentioned why wouldn't we have 6-car trains?
Well, we originally had 6-car trains.
Yeah.
And as you might recall, we paid to move these out, and we paid to do those that expansion of all those platforms. And now during the middle of the day for 5 hours, it's there. This creates inconvenience for people like myself who frequently come downtown during the middle of the day. It also creates a public safety issue if there were to be a 9/11 type terrorist event that we needed to evacuate the loop, God forbid. If we have 4-car trains, it's going to be harder to evacuate the loop than if we had 8-car trains running. So I'd like to discuss and reopen that.
Well, we'll have Carol work with you on that.
Okay.
I mean, just in terms of we would all be connected if something happened again. But Carol, where did Carol? Did she walk out? Okay, so Carol's out. So again,
We can table that and I'll go on to my next item. In that conversation with Mr. Irvine in 2015, I discussed how CTA workers, as you know, there's a curve at Roscoe and Sheffield that it's kind of it's eventually a 90-degree angle, but it's there. The trains go through that at a very high speed, and the track was originally designed for 6-car trains. So now when you add, during the rush hour peak periods, the 8-car trains, and they both come by at the same time, I feel, I live in the building right next to the tracks, and I feel G-forces going like this out on the track there. During my conversation with Mr. Irvine in 2015, I recommended and asked for a conversation to create a speed limitation on that curve so that we could stop the endless emergency welding that's occurring at the site. So every 6 months for the past 6 years, there's emergency welders out there on weekends getting paid weekend overtime rates to fix a problem that I personally think could be solved if we just lowered the speed limit on that curve, sir. So I'd like to invite yourself or anybody else to come out and have this conversation a second time, and look at that issue.
Is this something Chris could take a look at?
I think it would be a Chris or a Scott Darling conversation. It's a safety issue as much as an infrastructure issue, so
Okay.
I would basically pass that off to both of them.
Okay, then
Okay.
I'll move on. The RPM project, while I'm not in favor of it, is obviously going to happen at this point. I don't think enough thought's been put into getting community feedback about what they'd like that area to look like when we're done. Like there's areas of Clark Street that need some left turn lanes added. And then, this area is very different than Wilson. Wilson didn't have a lot of car traffic because not a lot of people own cars in that neighborhood. But, with Wrigley Field being 2 blocks away, and with the fact that Roscoe is the only east-west street between Addison and Belmont that can go west, and the Cubs are now regularly shutting down Addison for reasons that need to be discussed in a different body. I want to try to create some conversations with the community about, how are we going to do this and get through it together? How are we going to, restrict the number of street closures at once? Because if you close Clark, Sheffield, Roscoe all at the same time, you're going to have gridlock. And there's already stuff there. So I'd just like to try to create that before you guys start signing contracts with contractors and putting things in stone. I'd love the community to have a series of meetings, kind of like how the transportation department does when they propose a change to a street, to get community feedback and ideas and to get to know all of you and to try to make the best out of a difficult situation so that when we're done, we all have something we're proud of. And so I'd love to suggest that idea.
Okay.
Excuse me, David, Chairman, you now have about 5 minutes, which we also gave Ms. Cosby, so if you would, it's up to the chairman in
Yeah,
terms of
how
going
many-
further.
how
I
many
know we have a
more
lot of
issues?
issues.
I have one that I'd like to discuss publicly, and then, that's a 2-part issue, and then all the others I could take offline with you.
Yeah, because what I'd like to do, because you've got a couple of issues, Carol, where's Jerry Alter? So what I'd like to do is to get a couple of folks to meet with you afterwards on the other issues and those that you've discussed, but you said you had one more issue.
Sure. Regarding the RPM project, the CTA publicly promised to buy and demolish a list of buildings when they first proposed that. Last month, at a public meeting, I was shocked to learn that that was happening for all the buildings except one, which is a building that is right next to my house on the other side of the CTA tracks, 3404 Sheffield, 3406 Sheffield. This is a building, again, during Mr. Irvine's visit with me in 2015, that I discussed was highly problematic because they had done a large number, the owner at that time had done a large number of changes without building permits, including digging out the basement 4 feet that right next to structural pillars of the L tracks that could have created a yellow line safety type issue. So at this meeting, they explained that this guy is going to be allowed to knock down half of his building but leave half of it up. We were promised a clean, full demolition of that building, and due to the track record of this individual, that building, I would like the CTA to reconsider the proposal they've made to him. Number one, because given his track record, I don't think you'll get your project started on time. And number two, I don't deserve to have a bunch of unlicensed people out there without a building permit like they've been for the past 3 weeks. Again, it's a pattern of behavior. Doing stuff with chisels that'll take God knows how many years when, you guys, if you hire professional demolition, you have it done in a week or 2 at most, like you're doing with all the other buildings. So why should I suffer 2 years of noise from an irresponsible building owner when you guys promised me a clean, acquisition of all these properties and demolition of them? I'm not opposed to you putting a new building back up after it's done, but I'm opposed to you allowing this gentleman to do this on his own because it creates this other thing there. And then as a second part of that, there was damage to CTA property, which I also discussed with Mr. Irvine in 2015, that causes a mud flow to come across the property that I live at. And that has now destroyed the tar and asphalt on that property. And I would like the CTA to talk to the building owner about repaving that at the CTA's expense, because they didn't do anything when I talked about it in 2015 to prevent that from occurring, which was one of the things I said I was concerned about at that time.
All right. Karen,
That-
for the issue of demolition, You had
Go
something
ahead.
you
No,
want to
go
add?
ahead.
No, I just want to make sure that someone gets me up to speed as to why we would, take down
I
all
don't know.
the buildings and have the owner of another building take down his own building. So one, I want to get up to speed on that, but you had something you want to add?
No, I was going to suggest that we have him follow up with Jerry and with Chris on the concerns, particularly around the damage to CJ property. That was done by another property owner, just get more detail about what it is that happened and what we should do.
Okay.
One more really quick issue, if I may.
It's up to the chairman.
All right.
Thank you. Currently, your communications department doesn't communicate. And what I mean by that is, I wrote a letter, I wrote an email, I called about a month ago to speak to them. I got told, write an email, and I, as of this date, 3 weeks later, do not have a response to that email with some of these issues and some others that were raised there. And I'd like an explanation as to why the communications department isn't being held accountable to interacting with the community, because quite frankly, they should be my first line of conversation instead of this body.
I totally agree.
So we'll have
Steele.
Brian Steele follow
See
up
his hand?
directly
So
with him.
Brian's over the communication department. See his hand?
Okay, yep.
That's who you can see about that, and that
Okay.
won't happen again.
Okay, great.
All right. Thank
Thank
you,
you very
David.
much, Chairman.
All right, thanks for coming in.
Thank you, David. And that does conclude the public comment section. I do want to make sure I say that David's right. When he did meet with Kevin, and we've had numerous conversations, that whenever the issue of safety and speed and the structure was passed on either Kevin or I, it was passed on immediately to Chris Boucher and Derek Bolt. I just want to get that
Okay.
into the record.
All right.
We're done with public comment for there. Today, we can move on. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Greg. The next order of business today is the approval of the board minutes of February the 14th, 2018. The minutes were previously distributed. Any comments? Hearing none, I now entertain a motion to approve the minutes of the regular board meeting of February the 14th, 2018.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Ms. Irvine?
Yes.
Ms. Alvarez Rosales?
Yes.
Mr. Silva?
Abstain.
Abstain. Mr. Youngblood?
Yes.
Chairman Peterson?
Yes.
That motion is approved with 4 yes votes.
Thanks, Greg. We will now take up executive session matters. It is my understanding that there will be executive session this morning. Karen?
Yes, Chairman. We will have an executive session pursuant to Section 2C, subparagraphs 5 and 11 of the Open Meeting Act.
Thank you, Karen. I now have a motion to recess into executive session for the reasons so stated by council.
So moved.
Second.
Ms. Irvine?
Yes.
Ms. Alvarez Rosales?
Yes.
Mr. Silva?
Yes.
Mr. Youngblood?
Yes.
Chairman Peterson?
Yes.
That motion is approved with 5 yes votes.
Thank you. We should be Now entertain a motion to return to open session.
So moved.
Second?
Mr. Irvine?
Yes.
Ms. Alvarez Rosales?
Yes.
Mr. Silva?
Yes.
Mr. Youngblood?
Yes.
Chairman Peterson?
Yes.
That motion is approved with 5 yes votes.
Thanks, Greg. I would now like to address the executive session agenda item, board item number 4A. Karen?
Yes, Chairman. In executive session, the board discussed staff's recommendation pertaining to the acquisition of parcel 14 located at 3413 North Clark Street for the Red and Purple Modernization Project. Staff is recommending that the property be purchased for $1.3 million. FTA concurrence has been obtained. The seller is Deguchi Ventures LLC.
Thank you, Karen. I now entertain a motion to approve the following board item. An ordinance authorizing the acquisition of property located at 3413 North Clark Street, Chicago, Illinois, for the Red Purple Modernization Project.
So moved.
Second?
Mr. Irvine?
Yes.
Ms. Alvarez Rosales?
Yes.
Mr. Silva?
Yes.
Mr. Youngblood?
Yes.
Chairman Peterson?
Yes.
That motion is approved with 5 yes votes.
Thanks, Greg. The next order of business is a report from the Committee on Finance, Budget, and Audit. Director Silva.
The Committee on Finance, Audit, and Budget met earlier this morning. The committee approved the February 2018 committee minutes and reviewed the finance report. The committee reviewed the following ordinance. An ordinance authorizing an amendment to a parking management agreement with CPS Chicago Parking LLC. An ordinance authorizing a co-promotional trade agreement with the City of Chicago through the Department of Cultural Affairs and Special Events for 2018. An ordinance authorizing a University Pass U-Pass program agreement for 2018-2023 with participating colleges and universities. An ordinance authorizing an intergovernmental license agreement with the City of Chicago for a freestanding advertising billboard at 4114 West Irving Park Road, Chicago, Illinois. The committee also reviewed all 10 purchase and sales award recommendations. The committee recommended board approval of all 4 ordinances and the 10 purchases and sales award recommendations. The committee placed all of these recommended items of the omnibus for board approval. That concludes my report, Chairman.
Thank you, Director Silva. May I now have a motion to approve the omnibus as stated by Director Silva?
So,
I'll second.
Mr. Irvine?
Yes.
Ms. Alvarez Rosales?
Yes.
Mr. Silva?
Yes.
Mr. Youngblood?
yes.
Chairman Peterson?
Yes.
That motion is approved with 5 yes votes.
Thanks, Greg. The next order of business, construction report, Chris.
President, Directors, Council, Chris Bouchel, your Chief Infrastructure Officer. So today we'll be reporting on 5 projects, starting with the 95th Street Terminal Improvement Program. This project continues tight to schedule and tight to budget. Work is continuing aggressively on site towards the completion of the South Terminal. You can see from some of the photographs that will come and from some of the progress since our last meeting, how aggressively this project is moving forward on multiple shifts throughout the course of the week. So you can really start to see the form of the South Terminal taking place and really, the manifest improvements that this will offer to our customers in the area, not only in terms of the facility, but in terms of the service as well. You can kind of see in here just a small example in this photograph, a wind shelter, which will provide both shelter to our customers waiting for buses, as well as information and people heaters as well. One of the themes of this project is to pull some of the improvements that we've seen on the rail side over time and pull them out and to offer those to our bus customers also. Construction on the concourse level, fairly ordinary. It just is progressing into the finished materials on the next picture on the walls and then the ceiling. It's progressed significantly beyond this level as we sit out there today. Moving to the next project, Quincy Loop, I'm pleased to say that many important elements of the elevator are advancing. We had a big leap forward recently as we installed the structural component of those elevators, the elevator towers. So you can see those being flown in the middle of the night on in a service closure and street closure. So this successfully advances this project. It is on schedule and on budget and tight to schedule. It has, we'll see these elevators and the project overall achieving substantial completion this summer. So I'm pleased that we're making progress out there. Again, the elevator towers. Integrating this feature into a station of this age and historic importance is really noteworthy. Ravenswood loop signal continues tight to budget and tight to schedule. We are still, unfortunately, in the phase where I'm showing you structural pictures, but really in this type of project, I end up showing you pictures of cables and structural work, and then trains up there finalizing the movement of trains. It is a tough project to cut a ribbon on, but an important project to invest in because it means improved service through this corridor for many of our customers. Again, structural work. These are platforms that support either new signal houses or they support new signaling equipment of one sort or another. Illinois Medical District continues tight to budget. In terms of the schedule, as you know, we've had some challenges out there relative to some storm damage that occurred out there in the course of this work and that we're fixing through this project, as well as some discovered conditions relative to deteriorated concrete. This was a older station on the Forest Park branch, and we're dealing with those issues as they come up. This is really the temporary shoring. We've worked with the contractor to erect so that they can work on this on the Ogden Station House while minimizing the impact to rail traffic. So they're kind of up there above the trains that are running through working on that station house and the structural issues I mentioned. Railings and other things on the ramps that go down to the stations. In closing, and Director Irvine, I know you'll be particularly excited about this one because it's another bucket list item for you, I know. The final picture here, so we continue to progress with both finalizing the testing of the utility grade equipment that goes into these substations, as well as the installation of it. So here you'll be pleased to see 2 transformers and a rectifier. So those 2 transformers are sitting in the back, and you can see the little red tags on them. They transform power from a higher voltage, 12,005, down to a lower one, and then the rectifier turns it from AC into DC. So,
Which part is the rectifier?
the rectifier is the yellow one on the right there. 2 transformers are the big red ones, the ones with the red tags on them. That concludes my presentation.
All right, thank you, Chris. Are there any questions for Chris? All right, thank you, sir. Greg, is there any new business to come before the board?
No, sir.
All right, with no further business to come before the board, may I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
We're adjourned. Thank you.